Kenneth, turn around.
What is this? You can't
The
just
McLaren
walk
you
in
took
here.
out of this valet bay at 4 in the morning, every minute is on the hotel camera.
The man being confronted right now is Kenneth Smith, an overnight valet at the Hotel Indigo in downtown Baton Rouge. He took a guest's $200,000 McLaren on a 4 a.m. joyride, and then pulled a gun when the owner caught him.
Documented by who? You don't have the authority to...
The guest heard his own engine from his hotel room, Kenneth. We have it
You
all.
need to leave right now. I'm calling.
48 hours from this moment, Kenneth Smith would be sitting in a holding cell at East Baton Rouge Parish Prison, charged with 2 felonies, his name attached to one of the strangest valet incidents in Louisiana history. The investigation that put him there had not been running for years. It had been running for less than 4 hours. Because at 4 a.m. on February 11, 2017, the guest in room 408 of the Hotel Indigo in downtown Baton Rouge had heard something almost no one in that neighborhood ever heard. A McLaren MP412C revving through empty streets, blocks away from where it was supposed to be parked. And the man behind the wheel of that $200,000 supercar was the same 22-year-old valet who had taken the keys from him at check-in. Before we go any further, I have to ask, when you hand your keys to a valet at a hotel, do you ever actually wonder what happens to your car after they drive it around the corner? Drop your honest answer in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button now. This channel covers the case's local newsberries on page 6 every single week. Kenneth Smith was born in Baton Rouge in 1994 and grew up there. Baton Rouge is the state capital of Louisiana, a river city of about 225,000 people, stretched along the east bank of the Mississippi, defined by the petrochemical refineries to the north, the LSU campus to the south, and the I-110 overpass that splits the older black neighborhoods from the redeveloped downtown core. Kenneth grew up on the north side, in a section of the city where the median household income hovers somewhere around $28,000 a year, and where the words downtown jobs almost always meant service work, hotels, restaurants, parking garages, dish pits, the kitchens behind the convention center. He was the kind of kid who liked cars. Not in the way that every American boy claims to like cars, but specifically. He could identify a Mustang generation by the taillight pattern. He knew the difference between a Camaro SS and a regular V6 from the exhaust note alone. When the neighbor 2 doors down rebuilt a Monte Carlo in his driveway over the summer of 2007, Kenneth was 13 years old and spent most of his weekends sitting on an overturned milk crate watching the work, asking questions, handing tools across the engine bay when he was asked. His mother worked 2 jobs, one cleaning offices at a downtown insurance building in the evenings, and one as a cashier at a Family Dollar on Plank Road during the day. His father was not consistently in the picture. There was an older sister who would eventually move to Houston for nursing school, and a younger half-brother who Kenneth more or less helped raise, walking him to the bus stop, making him cereal, signing his report cards when their mother was already at her second shift. He went to Glen Oaks High School on the north side. He was not a strong student. Counselors described him in one early note as distracted but capable, polite, responds well to one-on-one attention. He played football for 1 season as a sophomore, outside linebacker, second string, and quit when his after-school shift at a Sonic drive-in on Airline Highway started conflicting with practice. He needed the money more than he needed the helmet. He graduated in 2012. He was the first person in his immediate family to finish high school. There was a small party in his grandmother's living room, sheet cake from Albertsons, a card with $20 in it from a cousin. For the next 4 years, Kenneth Smith bounced through the kind of jobs that swallow young men with no degree and no connections in Baton Rouge. He worked at a Raising Cane's on Florida Boulevard. He worked overnight stocking at a Walmart supercenter. He worked a brief stretch at a car wash on Government Street, where, for the first time, he actually got to sit behind the wheel of cars he could never afford to own. Pulling Lexus sedans and Cadillac Escalades from the wash tunnel to the detail bay, adjusting the seats back, smelling the leather. He told a coworker once that driving those cars for the 8 seconds it took to move them across the lot was the best part of any day I have ever had. In the summer of 2016, he applied for a valet position at a downtown hotel through a third-party staffing service that contracted with several IHG properties. The application asked for a driver's license, a clean 3-year driving record, and the ability to operate a manual transmission. Kenneth could do all three. His personal car was a 2003 Nissan Altima with 160,000 miles on it and a check engine light that had been on since the previous winter, but he could drive a stick. His uncle had taught him on a 1998 Ford Ranger in a parking lot off Scenic Highway when he was 16. He got the job. Starting pay was $9 an hour plus tips. The shifts that paid the best were the overnight shifts, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., because they came with a small differential and because tips on late-night business travelers and wedding party stragglers could be surprisingly generous. He took every overnight shift the schedule would give him. The hotel he was assigned to was the Hotel Indigo at 200 Convention Street, downtown Baton Rouge, an IHG property in the Arts and Entertainment District, overlooking the Mississippi River. The Hotel Indigo brand markets itself as boutique. The rooms are themed. There is a craft cocktail bar in the lobby. The guests are a mix of business travelers on per diem, weekend tourists from Houston and Atlanta, LSU parents in town for graduation weekends, and the occasional wedding party from one of the Riverview event venues a few blocks away. Valet parking was offered at $33 per night. For the first 6 months, Kenneth Smith was, by every available account, a good valet. He showed up on time. He wore the polo shirt and the black slacks and the laminated name badge. He learned the names of the regulars. He learned how to feather the clutch on a manual gearbox so that he could roll a car out of the cramped Hotel Indigo garage without ever stalling it in front of its owner. He learned that the trick to a good tip on a checkout was to bring the car around with the windshield already wiped down and the climate control already set to 72. The overnight shifts, though, were different from the daytime shifts. The overnight valet worked alone. From around midnight to 5 or 6 in the morning, the valet stand at the Hotel Indigo had exactly one employee on it, Kenneth Smith, and the valet key box, mounted on the wall just inside the bell desk, contained the keys to every guest car parked in the garage that night. The garage was monitored by a single overhead surveillance camera that pointed at the entrance. The interior of the garage was not, which meant that during the dead hours, roughly 1 a.m. to 5 a.m., when the lobby was empty, the front desk clerk was watching cable news on a muted television, and the bar had been closed for 2 hours. Every key in that box was accessible to one 22-year-old man with no supervision, and no one in the building who would know if he opened the box and took a key out. That was the system. That was how the Hotel Indigo's overnight valet operation actually worked. The American hotel valet system, especially at mid-tier boutique properties, runs on a foundation of trust that almost no guest ever examines. You pull up to a porte-cochere. A young man in a logo polo opens your door. You hand him your keys. He hands you a numbered ticket. You walk inside. You do not ask where he is taking your car. You do not ask who else has access to it. You do not ask whether the garage has cameras inside. You do not ask whether the valet has a clean driving record, whether he has any previous incidents, whether the staffing agency that placed him at this property has insurance, whether the hotel's insurance covers a third-party valet driving a guest vehicle off the property without authorization. You hand over the keys and you go to your room. The IHG corporate standards for valet operations at branded properties, Hotel Indigo, Holiday Inn, Crown Plaza, Kimpton, are not particularly strict. The brand standard requires that valet keys be stored in a secured cabinet or pegboard, that the cabinet be located in a non-public area, and that access be limited to authorized valet staff. The standard does not require a second employee on duty during overnight hours. It does not require interior garage surveillance. It does not require GPS tracking on guest vehicles. It does not require a logbook documenting every time a key is removed from the box. In practice, at the Hotel Indigo Baton Rouge in February of 2017, the system worked like this. A guest arrived. The valet on duty took the keys, hung them on a numbered hook inside a wooden cabinet behind the bell desk, and gave the guest a paper ticket with the matching number. The cabinet had a lock, but the lock was rarely engaged during a shift because the valet needed constant access. When the shift changed, the keys were counted. When the shift was over, the cabinet was locked, and the key to the cabinet was placed in a small lockbox at the front desk. That was the totality of the security architecture. The valet position itself was not a hotel employee position. Kenneth Smith was a contracted worker, placed at the Hotel Indigo by a third-party valet staffing company. The hotel did not run his background check. The hotel did not handle his payroll. The hotel did not directly supervise him. If something went wrong on his shift, the chain of liability ran through the staffing agency, through the agency's insurance carrier, through the hotel's master service agreement with the agency, and only eventually to the hotel's brand corporate office. By the time a complaint reached anyone who could actually do something about it, weeks could have passed. And the cars in that garage on any given night were not, on average, particularly remarkable. A Toyota Camry, a rented Nissan Altima, a Honda CR-V, a Ford Explorer with Texas plates, the kind of vehicles that a 22-year-old valet earning $9 an hour might find unremarkable, even forgettable. But on the night of February 10th, 2017, sometime in the early evening, a man named Kirk Kepper rolled up to the porte cochere of the Hotel Indigo Baton Rouge in a vehicle that was not unremarkable at all. It was a McLaren MP4 12C, mid-engine, twin-turbocharged 3.8-liter V8, carbon fiber monocoque, dihedral doors that opened upward, not outward. A car that, depending on year and trim, was worth somewhere north of $200,000. A car with an exhaust note that at any RPM could be heard from several blocks away on quiet downtown streets. Kenneth Smith took the keys. He gave Kirk Kepper a numbered ticket. He hung the keys on a hook inside the cabinet behind the bell desk. And at some point after midnight, when the lobby was empty and the front desk clerk was looking at his phone, Kenneth Smith took those keys back off the hook. What happened between roughly 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. on the morning of February 11th, 2017, is not fully documented in any public record. The police report establishes the bookends. The McLaren was parked in the Hotel Indigo garage at some point the previous evening, and at approximately 4 a.m., the McLaren was outside the garage, on a downtown Baton Rouge street, with Kenneth Smith behind the wheel and the engine running. Everything in between is partial reconstruction. What is known is this: the McLaren MP412C does not start quietly. The starter motor whines. The V8 catches with a sharp, throaty bark before settling into an idle that, even at the lowest setting, vibrates audibly through the floor of any building within 50 feet. The dihedral doors hiss when they open. The interior smells of leather and carbon fiber. The 7-speed dual-clutch transmission is operated by paddles behind the steering wheel. There is no clutch pedal, and the gear selector is a row of 3 buttons on the center console marked D, N, and R. For someone whose previous driving experience consisted of a 1998 Ford Ranger and a 2003 Nissan Altima, the cockpit of a McLaren MP412C is, to put it mildly, an unusual environment. The Hotel Indigo's valet garage exits onto a service alley that connects to Convention Street. From Convention Street, a driver heading out into the surrounding downtown neighborhood has several options. North Boulevard and Florida Street run east-west, paralleling the river. 3rd Street and 4th Street run north-south through the heart of downtown. At 4 a.m. on a Saturday morning in February, those streets are nearly empty. The bars have been closed for 2 hours. The early shift workers at the state office buildings have not yet begun to arrive. The streets belong to delivery trucks, garbage trucks, and the occasional patrol car. Kenneth Smith drove the McLaren out of the garage and into those empty streets. He drove it far enough and revved it hard enough that the engine note carried back across several city blocks and up 4 stories into the open window of room 408 of the Hotel Indigo, where a man who knew the sound of his own car better than he knew the sound of his own voice was lying in bed. Kirk Kepper woke up. According to a post on a McLaren owner's forum from someone familiar with the case, Kepper later described the moment by saying he could hear a very familiar sound, a McLaren engine pouting about the Baton Rouge neighborhood. That word, pouting, is McLaren owner shorthand. It is the sound the car makes when a driver is pushing the throttle in short, aggressive bursts and then letting off, the exhaust burbling and popping on overrun. It is not the sound of a car being moved 20 feet across a garage to reposition it. It is the sound of a car being driven hard by someone who wants to hear it. Kepper got out of bed. He pulled on clothes. He took the elevator down to the lobby. He walked to the front desk. He asked where his car was. The front desk clerk, who had not noticed anything unusual, presumably radioed the valet stand or stepped outside to check the porte cochere. The McLaren was not in its parking spot. Kepper walked outside. He stood on the sidewalk in front of the Hotel Indigo. And he waited. At some point in the next several minutes, Kenneth Smith brought the McLaren back. He pulled it up to the porte cochere, or to a curb in the immediate vicinity of the hotel entrance. He turned the engine off. He got out, and standing on the sidewalk waiting for him was the owner of the car, with his phone already in his hand, already recording. The catalyst in this case is not a sting operation or a routine audit or a whistleblower phone call. The catalyst is a sound. Specifically, it is the sound of a 3.8-liter twin-turbocharged V8 traveling through approximately 400 feet of cold downtown Baton Rouge air at 4 o'clock in the morning, passing through a hotel window that had been left open a crack for ventilation, and registering in the half-asleep brain of the man who had paid the better part of $250,000 to own that engine. There is a particular cruelty in how this scheme came apart, because the entire premise of the unauthorized Joyride model relies on one assumption. that the owner of the vehicle will not, under any circumstances, be in a position to recognize the sound of his own car being driven without permission. In almost every case, that assumption holds. The owner is at a restaurant 3 blocks away. The owner is asleep with the air conditioning running and a noise machine on. The owner is in a hotel room on the wrong side of the building, facing an interior courtyard, hearing nothing but the hum of the HVAC. Kirk Kepper was not in any of those positions. Kirk Kepper was in a room with a window that faced the street. The window was cracked. Kirk Kepper was a McLaren owner, a man who, as the forum post would later observe, knew the sound of a McLaren engine the way a parent knows the sound of their own child crying in the next room. He did not need to see the car. He did not need confirmation. He heard the engine, he recognized it instantly, and he understood, somewhere in the half-second between waking and getting out of bed, that whatever he was hearing was wrong. That is the catalyst. A guest who was an enthusiast. A car that announced itself every time the throttle was touched. A 22-year-old valet who could not resist taking it out, and could not resist driving it the way it was designed to be driven, and did not consider, perhaps did not believe, that the man who owned the car would actually be able to hear him. The Hotel Indigo's surveillance cameras would later be reviewed. The hotel's management would later issue a statement. The Baton Rouge Police Department would later arrive on the scene. But none of those things were the trigger. The trigger was a sound. Quick check-in before we get to the confrontation. If you've ever handed your keys to a valet, leave a comment with the most expensive car you've ever ridden in. Doesn't matter if you owned it or just sat in it. I'm curious what this audience has been around. And if you're new here, subscribe. We don't let these stories get buried. The investigation in this case is, in a sense, almost completed before it begins. By the time Baton Rouge police arrived at the Hotel Indigo, the suspect was on scene, the vehicle was on scene, the owner was on scene, and the entire confrontation had been filmed on a cell phone that was already, within hours, on its way to Facebook. But the investigation still had to do its work. Officers responding to the call at 200 Convention Street made contact with Kirk Kepper first. Kepper provided his identification, his proof of ownership of the McLaren MP412C, his hotel guest registration, and a verbal account of what had happened. He explained that he had been awakened by the sound of the car's engine, had come downstairs, had found the vehicle missing, had waited outside the hotel, had confronted the valet upon the valet's return, and had recorded the encounter on his phone. He offered the video to investigators. Officers then turned to Kenneth Smith. Smith was still on the scene. The McLaren was parked at or near the porte cochere. According to the publicly reported sequence, a second person, possibly another hotel employee, possibly a bystander, was seen on the video taking Smith by the arm at one point and walking him to the McLaren, where Smith reached into the vehicle and retrieved an object. The implication from subsequent reporting was that this object was a firearm. The firearm itself became the central physical piece of evidence in the case, because the unauthorized use charge, Louisiana Revised Statute 1468-4, is a serious felony, but a survivable one. A first offense conviction for unauthorized use of a motor vehicle carries a maximum of 2 years and a $1,000 fine, and for a defendant with no prior record and a sympathetic narrative, it is routinely pled down or diverted. The aggravated assault with a firearm charge, Louisiana Revised Statute 1437.4, is something else entirely. That charge, if it sticks, carries up to 10 years at hard labor with no probation or parole on the first 5 years. Which is why what Kenneth Smith said next, on camera, in real time, in front of the owner of the vehicle he had just driven away from the hotel garage at 4 a.m., would become the most important piece of evidence in the entire case. Because Kenneth Smith did not deny taking the car. He did not deny having the gun. He explained both. He explained both directly into the lens of Kirk Kepper's phone, in his own voice, while the recording was running. The video is roughly 1.5 minutes long. It is shot vertically, the way phone video almost always is. The lighting is the orange-yellow of downtown sodium vapor streetlights mixed with the white spill of the Hotel Indigo's porte cochere lights. 2 men are visible. One is Kirk Kepper, standing on the sidewalk in casual clothes, his voice tight with the specific kind of fury that belongs to a man who has just been awakened by the sound of someone else driving his $200,000 car. The other is Kenneth Smith, in his Valet polo, 22 years old, gesturing with both hands, talking fast. You took my car out of the garage. First of all, I grabbed my gun because that was watching your car. You grabbed a gun? Because he was watching your car, so he wouldn't take your car. I grabbed my gun because he kept watching it. Look at the cameras. He kept watching it. The defense, articulated by Kenneth Smith into a cell phone camera at 4 o'clock in the morning, was this. A third person, unnamed, unidentified in the video, possibly a passerby, possibly a homeless individual, possibly nobody at all, had been hanging around the hotel garage that night, watching the McLaren. Smith, concerned that this third person was casing the car for theft, had taken it upon himself to move the vehicle, and, anticipating that the third person might follow him, had retrieved a firearm from somewhere, his own car, presumably, or a bag in the valet stand, to defend the McLaren against this theoretical threat. It is, on its face, a remarkable narrative. It accounts for every fact Kepper has just confronted him with. The car was not in the garage because Smith moved it for its own protection. There is a gun in play because Smith armed himself against the imaginary thief. The keys were used without authorization because the situation, as Smith perceived it, was an emergency. The story even comes with an evidentiary offer. Look at the cameras, Smith says, twice. He is directing the McLaren's owner, and by extension the police, to review the Hotel Indigo's surveillance footage to verify the existence of the third person. The video continues. Kepper is shouting. Smith is gesturing. At one point, a second figure, possibly another employee, possibly a hotel staffer summoned by the commotion, appears at the edge of the frame, takes Smith by the arm, and walks him toward the McLaren. Smith leans into the vehicle. He retrieves an object. The video is too dark and the angle too oblique to identify the object with certainty, but the subsequent police report would establish that a firearm was recovered from the area and that the firearm was associated with Kenneth Smith. Then the police arrived. Then Kenneth Smith was placed in handcuffs. Then the McLaren was returned to its rightful owner. Then the night, which had begun with a single valet alone in a hotel garage and a guest asleep 4 floors up, ended with a 22-year-old in the back of a Baton Rouge Police Department cruiser, charged with 2 felonies, his explanation already preserved on Facebook video for the entire internet to evaluate. Kenneth Smith was booked at East Baton Rouge Parish Prison on 2 charges. Count 1, unauthorized use of a motor vehicle, Louisiana Revised Statute 1468.4, a felony carrying up to 2 years of imprisonment and up to a $1,000 fine for a first offense. Count 2. Aggravated assault with a firearm, Louisiana Revised Statute 1437-4. A felony carrying up to 10 years at hard labor, with no probation or parole on the first 5 years of any sentence imposed. He was processed, fingerprinted, photographed. His mugshot was taken. A young man in a white t-shirt, eyes tired, mouth slightly open as if he were about to say something to the booking officer that he never got around to saying. He was held overnight. He posted bond the following day. He was released. Meanwhile, the video that Kirk Kepper had recorded on his phone made its way to Facebook, and from Facebook to WBRZ, the local ABC affiliate in Baton Rouge, and from WBRZ to a series of automotive blogs and forums, Jalopnik, the McLaren Life Forum, several others, that delight in stories of valets misbehaving with exotic cars. The phrase, "Valet took a McLaren on a joyride," became, for a few news cycles, the kind of viral local crime story that gets picked up nationally and then, just as quickly, fades. The Hotel Indigo's management, contacted by WBRZ on the Monday following the incident, initially declined comment. They later posted a statement on Kepper's Facebook video. The management team at Hotel Indigo takes the security and safety of our guests very seriously. We are very distressed that this happened. This was an alarming incident, one we have never experienced before at our hotel. We have taken steps with the appropriate authorities. Since this is an ongoing investigation, we are not at liberty to make any further comments. The statement was carefully worded. It did not identify Kenneth Smith by name. It did not specify whether he had been a direct employee of the hotel or a contracted worker placed by a third-party staffing agency. It did not detail what security changes, if any, the hotel intended to make. It did not address the structural reality that on any given overnight shift at the Hotel Indigo Baton Rouge, a single valet had unsupervised access to every key in the box. The public record on what happened to Kenneth Smith after his release is, in a word, thin. There is no published trial outcome. There is no published plea agreement. There is no published sentencing record. In Louisiana, first offense unauthorized use cases are often resolved through plea agreements that reduce the charge to a misdemeanor or place the defendant in a pre-trial diversion program. The aggravated assault with a firearm charge, the serious one, the one that carried real prison time, may have been reduced, may have been dropped for evidentiary reasons related to the firearm itself, or may have been resolved through a plea to a lesser included offense. None of that is in the public record. What is in the public record is the video. The video is still there. If you search Kirk Kepper's name and the words McLaren and Baton Rouge, you can still find it. You can still hear Kenneth Smith, 22 years old, in his Valet Polo, explaining into a cell phone camera at 4 o'clock in the morning that he took the McLaren because a stranger had been watching it. You can still hear him say, twice, "Look at the cameras." You can still see the dihedral door of the McLaren MP4 12C hanging open in the orange light of the Hotel Indigo's porte cochere. You can still see, faintly, in the background of the frame, the second figure walking Kenneth Smith to the car to retrieve the object that the police would later log as evidence. Kenneth Smith was 22 years old. He worked $9 an hour plus tips. He drove a 2003 Nissan Altima with a check engine light that had been on since the previous winter. For one stretch of approximately 3 hours on the morning of February 11th, 2017, he drove a $200,000 McLaren MP4 12C through the empty streets of downtown Baton Rouge, and he revved it hard enough that the man who owned it heard him 4 stories up. He told the owner, on camera, that he had done it to protect the car. The cameras were available for anyone to check. This story was wild, but the case right here on your screen is even harder to believe. Click it now.